talk is an introduction to the concept of the septenary nature of humankind. The core teaching of Theosophy is that humankind has 7 principles, and this is an essential piece to an understanding of Theosophy. It's referred to throughout H.P. Blavatsky's writing. They're outlined in her book, the 1889 book, The Key to Theosophy, and further explored in the Esoteric Instructions. They're also mentioned throughout the Secret Doctrine. The first mention appears actually in Esoteric Buddhism by A.P. Sinnett, which was published in 1883. So these 7 principles consist of a lower quaternary, including the physical and astral bodies, and an upper triad of mind, soul, and spirit. They illustrate the progression and evolution of humanity in line with the 3rd fundamental proposition in the Secret Doctrine Proem on page 17, and that is the need for the obligatory pilgrimage of every soul to go through the cycle of incarnation. And this is so important to our understanding of what happens to us when we so-called die. Now, these principles were referred to quite a bit by other speakers in the conference. So I would imagine we've all got a pretty good idea of what we're talking about. So I'd just like to have a look at some of the basic and interesting points connected with this. So we learn in Theosophy that the whole universe is built on 7s, including our planet. It has 7 planes or layers of being, 7 evolutionary worlds, plus there are 7 creative forces of nature, 7 top dhyani Buddhas or sons of light, and 7 groups of Dayan Chohans, sort of angelic forces which make up the primeval 7 rays. H.P. Blavatsky gives details of the septenary principles in The Key to Theosophy. The upper or spiritual being composed of 3 principles or aspects, the upper imperishable triad, and the lower or physical quaternary composed of 4, in all 7, she says. Now, it looks complicated, but if you think about it, we have several different people, if you like, inside us. For instance, when we meditate or listen to a beautiful piece of music, we're transported upwards and our spirits are lifted. When we're working or being intellectual, our minds can be quite mechanical. Tick, 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 it's really a mechanical thing. On the other hand, if we get upset or angry, we're in a different place again, which feels much darker and lower in vibration. So we're different people and shift between that. So the septenary division also appears in Buddhist and Indian teaching. And there's a table on page 157, volume 1 of the Secret Doctrine, showing esoteric Buddhist, Vedantic, and Taraka Raja Yoga classifications. Interestingly, in The Key to Theosophy, they're shown in 2 parts. The lower quaternary, this diagram, is actually on the bottom of page 91. Then you have to turn to the next page, the upper triad on page 92, which is at the top. And this emphasizes the division between the 2. And it's an interesting psychological effect, going from the bottom of one page, then turning it over and leaping up to the upper triad on the next page. I've adapted both diagrams into one so that the whole picture becomes clearer. The lower quaternary then, let's have a look at that. This has a base in the physical and dies when we die. So number one, the bottom one, the physical, the Sula Sarira. This is made up of molecules informed and ensouled by atoms. The molecule has in it 7 principles in their prakritic, i.e. material manifestation. It's a fascinating view, as HPB tells us. Man as a whole contains every element that is found in the universe. And as there is nothing in the microcosm that is not in the macrocosm, that is not in the microcosm, so every molecule is, in its turn, a mirror of its universe, man. Now, please note, I'm not talking here about males. I'm talking, and HPB is referring to humanity as a whole. She says, it is this which renders mankind alone capable of conceiving the universe on this plane of existence. So we have in each of us the macrocosm and the microcosm. And this comes from the esoteric section, instruction number 5. So think about it, even this dense physical body is a mass of vibrating molecules, and the 7 aspects are contained in every part of us. So, number 2, prana, the life or vital principle. Prana, or life, is, strictly speaking, we're told, the radiating force or energy of Atma, as the universal life and the one self. Prana permeates the whole being of the objective universe and is called a principle only because it is an indispensable factor and the driving force, it's the energy of the living person. In connection with the human body, the circulation of life, prana, through the body is by way of the blood. It is the vital principle in us. It's pranic rather than prana, and is closely allied to the 3rd level, the astral, and the 4th level, the desire body. So number 3 then, the astral body, the linga sarira. The linga sarira, or ethereal double of the body, is molecular in constitution, but of molecules invisible to the physical eyes. It is the vehicle of prana and supports life in the body. It's the reservoir or sponge of life. I love that description of it. It's the sponge of life. It's soaking up, it's gathering up from all the natural kingdoms around. And it's the immediate intermediary between the kingdoms of the pranic and the physical life, as life cannot pass immediately and directly from the subjective to the objective, because HPB tells us nature passes gradually from sphere to sphere, overleaping none. Being the intermediary, it draws life from the universe and it pumps it into and round the physical body as prana. Now, if any of you have had photographs taken of your aura, you can actually see things that are likely to happen. I've had a look on the internet about who does this sort of photography, and the lady that did mine, who lived near here, has long gone. This was about 20 years ago, but I have found a place in Glastonbury, and there are places in London that will take pictures of auras, and it's fascinating how you can see things being soaked up in your aura that may manifest in a few months' time. It's also useful because you can avoid unfortunate things that you might see there. So that then is the lower astral form. Now there is a higher astral form called the Mayavi Rupa. Rupa means body or form. This is the illusory body or thought body of an initiate, the higher astral mental form. And this form is created by the power of will and thought of an adept. And it may be made an exact double of the person or any other shape desired. It's called an illusory body because it is only a temporary creation of the adept. When it has accomplished its intended purpose, it's withdrawn and dissolved. Hence, there are many stories throughout theosophy or the early theosophical writings talking about the materialization or the appearance of masters or other beings to people in the early society. For instance, hence stories throughout the early theosophical writings of various appearances by the masters and others when they were known to be elsewhere. Mrs. Cooper Oakley recounted seeing Master M suddenly appear at Adyar in the June of 1885 when HPB was ill. She wrote, "Suddenly there appeared on the veranda the Master M, fully materialized. He passed quickly through the outer room into HPB's room. He discussed with HPB, the other occupants later found out, the option that she could die peacefully or that she could live and write the secret doctrine." So we move on to the Kamarupa. The Kamarupa, or desire body. Kama is the seat of the driving and electrical forces in man, the basis of action. Now, this can be very confusing because this is Kama and not Karma. Hence, we get Kama, the desires and the passions, the Kama Sutra, which is a manual on lovemaking. Very different, not quite the same thing as Karma. Now, the Kamarupa, or the Kamarupa or form, has animal cunning or intelligence. For example, look at your cat. And you can see that the cat is figuring something out. It's intelligent. But we humans have something more. We have some spark, and that spark is self-consciousness. And this is still dormant in the animal. So the Kamarupa then is the center of animal and the man human. It's the animal man. And this denotes the demarcation which separates the mortal man from the immortal entity. It's also called the animal soul. So we'll move on to the upper triad, leave this for the time being. The upper triad. We'll look at Atma, spirit, which is one with the absolute as its radiation. And number 6, Buddhi, the spiritual soul, the vehicle of pure universal spirit. And then there's this strange thing called Manas. A key to explaining this can be found in the Secret Doctrine, Volume 2, Anthropogenesis, on the origins of humankind. Now, up until about halfway through the third great root race. Now, I'm not talking here about race as it is generally known today. This refers to people of every colour, and it's referring to humanity as a whole. At this stage, halfway through this early root race, we're not as physically dense as we are now, and sexual reproduction has not yet evolved. We are hermaphrodite. There is no gender. And there's a lovely part somewhere where HPB describes how humankind reproduces by budding. So humankind needs to become more physical in order to evolve. At this stage, it's made up of the 4 lower principles and the top 2, Atma and Buddhi. These are referred to as the monad. But where does this come from? You've got one, I've got one, but in fact, they're not ours at all. They don't actually belong to us, and they are part of the absolute. They emanate from the absolute because they're sparks of the divine. They are an indestructible star of divine fire and light, thrown out to experience the circle or the cycle of necessity, while at the same time still being one with the absolute. I'm sure you've heard it described many times as the divine spark within the fire or the drop within the ocean. In The Secret Doctrine, Volume 2, Anthropogenesis, page 105, there's a lovely stanza describing how the Petries, also the angelic beings, created the lower quaternary, a physical form to house the breath, which is the human monad. Part of that, it says, but the breath needs a mind to embrace the universe. There's nothing to link the two. And it says, thus man remained an empty, senseless Bhuta. Bhuta actually means a ghost or a phantom. So there's no self-consciousness. There's no self-consciousness, nothing to link that highest spiritual part with the lower physical brain and body. So what is it then that links it? This is manas. This mind, this part of the mind, then is provided by the Manasaputras, the sons of Mahat. Now, who or what are the sons of Mahat? Mahat, or the universal mind, is the spirit of Manas, is the source of Manas. Manas is also called the embodied spirit because it is, according to the theosophical philosophy, the Manasaputras, or the sons of the universal mind, who created, or rather produced, the thinking man. What are they? They are spiritual beings who have to continue their development. Think of them more as forces. They are essences, intelligences, and conscious spirits, entities seeking to become still more conscious by uniting with more developed matter. Their essence is too pure to be distinct from the universal essence, but they have to pass through earthly human experiences in order to become all-wise and to be able to start on the returning ascending cycle. They are not all one group. The Manasaputras are all different. There are many levels and grades. Kumaras and Agnishvatas are a very high grade. The Manasaputras are lower. And there are many grades. There are as many different types as there are each one of us. So what are they and where did they come from? HPB tells us that according to the semi-esoteric allegories, these beings were returning nirvanis from preceding Mahamanvantaras, the ages of incalculable duration which have rolled away in the eternity. She says some Vedantins might say this is not so. The nirvani can never return, which is true. She says during the Manvantara they belong to, but erroneous where eternity is concerned. For it is said in the sacred slokas, the thread of radiance which is imperishable and dissolves only in nirvana, re-emerges from it in its integrity on the day when the great law calls all things back into action. This ties in very well with what HBB says in the notes to the Voice of the Silence. They're what the Mahayana Buddhists call Pratyeka Buddhas. So the note from the Voice of the Silence reads, Pratyeka Buddhas are those bodhisattvas who strive after and often reach the Dharmakaya robe after a series of lives. Caring nothing for the woes of mankind or to help it, but only for their own bliss, they enter nirvana and disappear from the sight and the hearts of men. In Northern Buddhism, a Pratyeka Buddha is a synonym for spiritual selfishness. So, according to this, the Manasaputras are returning nirvanis from preceding Mahamanvantaras. Even these Pratyeka Buddhas, so criticized in the Voice of the Silence for being selfish, have to come back in the next Mahamanvantara to carry on their evolution by providing the energy link for the next wave of humanity. I mean, an amazing concept, really. This huge rolling tide of evolution. But humanity in the meantime has moved on. It doesn't stop. And these high spiritual beings residing in nirvana have, in the meantime, fallen behind. So when the time is right, in the new Mahamanvantara, they have to come out, combine with the physical vehicles and the Atma Buddhis of other beings in order to continue their evolution. Now, each one of us has our own distinct one. They are us. There's a lovely description in the collected writings, originally from the Esoteric Papers, where HPB describes how the Manasaputras blend with the human. As the teaching says, each is a pillar of light. Having chosen its vehicle, it expanded, surrounding with an akashic aura the human animal, while the divine monastic principle settled within that human form. And for the rest of this Manvantara, Manas, along with Atma Buddhi, form the upper triad. It is immortal and imperishable. And then at each new physical rebirth, the lower quaternary is created anew, and we get a new one each time. When did this happen? They entered us about halfway through the third root race, when humanity had solidified enough to be able to reproduce sexually. And at that point, with the entry of these beings, mankind became self-conscious, and we will work together with them for the rest of this Manvantara. As that it is only at the midpoint of that third root race that man was endowed with this Manas mind. The time scale, having passed through all the kingdoms of nature in the previous 3 rounds, HPB says, his physical frame, one adapted to the thermal conditions of those early periods, was ready to receive the divine pilgrim at the first dawn of human life. And she gives that date as about 18 million years ago. Now, coming back to this, the thread of radiance, which is imperishable and dissolves only in nirvana, re-emerges from it in its integrity on the day when the great law calls all things back into existence. talking of that thread, introduces the concept found in the ancient works of the Karana Sarira on the plain of Satma, which is the golden thread on which, like beads, the various personalities of this higher ego are strung. I think it's a beautiful way of describing each reincarnation. And in the key, the Sutratma is called the thread soul. So this amazing thread upon which all our various reincarnations. Manas comes in with the fifth principle, but it also uses the fourth. And on this we can see that I've coloured in blue, that's the Manas, but there's also some blue at the top of the Kamarupa, because Manas comes into the fifth principle, but also uses that fourth principle. And I say, it comes, but in fact, it's us. We come, and we come to learn. Part of us lodges in that fourth principle, along with the animal intelligence and passions, in order to learn. It needs to pass through human experiences to become all wise and to continue our evolution on the ascending part of the cycle. Then, what we learn, the higher thoughts, consciousness, experiences, and spiritual aspirations lift up through the Abkarana, which is the little two-way arrow, the Antakarana, the rainbow bridge, to inform and be assimilated by higher manas. Now, when we die, the top three, Atma, Buddhi, Manas, including the spiritual things we've learned in this lifetime, go into Devachan for rest and recuperation and bliss. Devachan, we're told, is a place wherein we can experience an utter temporary oblivion of all the miseries and sorrows of life. Certainly not the same as nirvana. The Pratyeka Buddhas, or if we're selfish about it, we go into nirvana, and that lasts for a Mahamantara. Devachan, the place of bliss. HBB tells us that it's not less than 1,500 or 2,000 years that we're in Devachan. And interestingly, this is Devachanic life. And she says it takes that long before we're called back into incarnation. So how long is it? And are Devachanic years the same as human years? Because some people can recollect lives that are certainly much more recent than 1,500 years. So we can then come back into incarnation. We come back in order to learn some more. To finish then, it's a huge rolling evolution that we're all involved in. We have, as well as we are able, to become co-workers in the cyclic task and to do our best. As HPB says in The Voice of the Silence, be not discouraged, but try, ever keep trying. For no efforts, not the smallest, whether in the right or wrong direction, can vanish from the world of causes. The pepper plant will not give birth to roses, nor the sweet jessamine's silver star to thorn or thistle turn. Yeah, there was quite an interesting question. What do I think happens when we meditate? And what happens regarding Atma, Buddhi, and Manas? So I'd like to mention a very interesting booklet called A Mind to Embrace the Universe by E.L. Gardner. In it, He enlarges on two or three things, that come up in the voice of the silence. And I must mention that ELG studied the esoteric section instructions and appears to have been very sensitive. Now, one of these is the passage on page 16, where he says, merge into one sense thy senses, that sense alone which lies concealed within the hollow of thy brain. He draws an analogy between the amoeba, a single-celled animal which feels solely through its outer membrane, and the human mental body, the aura. And he says that by withdrawing other senses during meditation, we can achieve a heightened awareness of the spiritual through the outer periphery. That's the outer outer aura. So that's one thing that may happen during meditation. Now, if it were to be still for a moment, ELG says, we would be able to see the nucleus of the amoeba. And he continues the analogy by saying that in the human, our nucleus coincides with the hollow of our brain. So can I have the sort of this is from a very old book, The Miracle of the Human Body, which I grew up with, and it's very nice because in that you can see the hollow of the brain. Number 3, the slit between hemispheres. It's the third ventricle. So then, in the hollow of our brain during life, he says that our mind is in the form of a sphere of brilliant clarity, aglow with the astral light of the higher mental plane. He then explains how, in the hollow of our brain, close to this third ventricle, are two glands, the pineal and the pituitary, basically where the various parts are. The central ventricle is number 3, 1 to either side. I think the 5th goes up to the crown, and the 4th goes down the spine. Side view. So these in the central part of the brain show where the pituitary and the pineal glands are. Number 8, the blue, is the pineal, and the red one is the pituitary. Now, he tells us the ray of Anasaputra comes in through the pituitary, the ray of Ardayani Buddha into the pineal, that's a Buddhic ray, and the ray of Atma comes in through the crown of our heads, straight into that brilliant sphere. So that's another thing. Secondly, when we meditate, we are attempting to make ourselves aware of these forces, so we switch levels. That's the page from The Voice of the Silence, about silencing thy thoughts and fix thy whole attention on thy master, whom yet thou dost not see, but whom thou feelest, and merge thy senses into one sense alone. And 'tis by that sense alone, which lies concealed in the hollow of thy brain, that the steep path which leadeth to thy master may be disclosed before thy soul's dim eyes. So my apologies to Mr. Gardner for rushing through his very interesting little book, and obviously a very simplified summary. The original is more complex and the concept not explained. But certainly that's what can happen when we meditate. That's what we're aiming for.